Content warning. This video is not made for kids. It contains fictional depictions of mental illness, fictional violence, and fictional abuse. The fictional characters in this story are heavily afflicted by the things that I have spelled out to you, and some of the inner monologue seems to suggest that they should be getting hurt like this, but that is absolutely not the case. Me portraying this abuse or mental illness is meant to show the audience how the illness or abuse feels inside of the mind of the afflicted person, so they can sympathize and maybe stop themselves from following a similar pattern in the future. Be careful if you're easily triggered. You're most likely about to enter the mind of someone who is heavily afflicted by illness and abuse. Viewer discretion is advised. His mother partied the entire night, while Gregory just tried to stay out of her way. He wasn't really sure if it could be called a party, since there weren't any guests to share in her accomplishment, but she didn't seem to care. Her voice floated up the staircase, muffled through the door of his room, whooping and hollering and chattering to nobody but herself, the volume on the TV cranked up to the max. All the while, Gregory laid there on his bed and waited. If he was going to get out of here, he had to wait until she passed out. The night only got darker, his eyes straining to distinguish between the different shades of blue that encompassed the world, continuously wondering how long it had been and how much longer he would have to wait. For a while, he felt that the night would never end. The activity downstairs rose and fell like the tide, occasionally punctured by the crashing of an old appliance as she ripped it out of the wall in some sort of act of rebellion against this poverty-stricken life she had lived before. Whatever his mother was planning to do with the money, he didn't care. All that he wanted was to return to Freddie. At some point, Gregory decided to pass the time by having a little party of his own. He wouldn't need to bring any of the food from the stash with him, and he still hadn't finished the lollipop from the doctor. So, without worrying about saving the good stuff for later, Gregory opened every single cup of applesauce and stuffed every block of unprepared ramen he could fit into his mouth. For dessert, he enjoyed the lollipop until it was gone, nibbling on the papery stick as he leaned back against the wall and sighed contentedly. Okay, now he had to think. It was going to be dawn soon. Just saying that he was going to run away was much easier than actually doing it. He would need to think of what he would do after escaping the house. A cockroach flew across the room and landed on some of the open packets, the buzzing noise sending a trickle of fear down his spine. He wanted to go back to Freddie, but not go back to the Pizzaplex. It was a very strange combination of feelings. The Pizzaplex had been horrible. It would be unbearable to stand within those dark walls again, to smell all that pizza 24/7. Still, though, if he would be able to live with Freddie, he would still prefer the Pizzaplex over staying with his mother. The sky began to brighten. It was so slow Gregory didn't register it at first. His eyes kept drooping closed, his head bobbing as he began to nod off. Staying awake had been a struggle for the last dozen hours, his whole body begging for him to crawl beneath the blanket and forget about what his mother had done to him. But he couldn't be the one to go down first. The next time he forced his eyes open, he saw it. The deep, oceanic darkness of the night was shifting in hues, lifting into something brighter, like a submarine ascending to the surface. He got up, wincing at the stiffness in his neck, picking his way around the empty wrappers to check through the window. The rickety wooden fence didn't do much to obscure the rest of the neighborhood, each home packed together so tightly there must be no fresh air between them. There was a broken window or two, a gutter hanging on by its final screws, crumbling chimneys and rusted old bikes. But above the pointed tips of the roofs, the clouds in the sky were beginning to take on an indigo and violet light, announcing the arrival of the new day's sun. Gregory pulled away and pressed his ear to the door of his room next, holding his breath as he listened for any signs of life. The TV was finally shut down, no staggering footsteps or disoriented giggles. Nothing but a few creaks and clicks from the house trying to settle after such a rough night. Gregory stayed poised at the door for several minutes afterwards, searching for anything that signaled that there was still danger. Nothing. Tingling excitement crawled up his calves, and Gregory put his hand on the cold, rusty knob. He took one last look at his room, the faint golden sunlight beginning to trickle in. The mattress, the patchy blankets, the empty food wrappers. He would need none of it where he was going. Slowly, very, very slowly, he pulled, the usual squeal of the hinges spreading out into something stifled and weak. Gregory had done this routine so many times it barely required any thought. He poked his head out into the hall, eyes on his mother's room. Empty. He turned his attention to the stairs, but was unable to see much from this angle. He quietly thanked the carpet as he carefully tread out towards the stairs, each step unheard. From the top of the stairs, he could only see a tiny slice of the kitchen in the living room. Still, even from here, he could tell it was a mess. Pizza. He was smelling pizza again. Pizza and a sickly sweet stench of alcohol mixing together into one monstrous amalgamation. He felt himself drifting back, his body going immobile as the memories of the mall snuck up behind him. He shook himself, trying to ignore it. He had to focus on the stairs right now. They were made of wood, some of the boards slanted and spaced unevenly, the majority of them more than willing to give him away. He strode forwards, already knowing the pattern. He stuck to the left of the steps at first, skipping the third one, then the fifth and the sixth, holding on tight to the railing as he evaded the spots where the floorboards would squeal. When he eased his weight onto the main floor, he was finally able to take in the destruction of his mother's celebration. Trash was everywhere. He counted at least 3 pizza slices splattered on the floor, the stained cardboard boxes hanging off of the table like the pelts of hunted animals. There were so many different brands of drinks, Gregory didn't have the vocabulary to identify each one. It really did look like his mother wanted to try one of everything, different flowery titles and flavors scrawled over bottles piled in heaps as tall as his knee, possibly sorted based on how much she liked them. All of the cabinets in the pantry were flung open, the contents inside thrown out with so much force it looked like a raccoon had a seizure in there. The smell of pizza and alcohol had gotten stronger too, to an extent that he had to physically struggle against rising bile for several minutes. Don't get distracted. This is important. Too important. Gregory was used to his mother making a mess, but this was on an entirely different level that he never thought possible. With one glance around, Gregory solidified his decision. He was not going to spend every single day with a parent who had enough money to do this whenever she wanted to. Gregory turned towards the back door, the one just beside the TV. It had 2 layers to it, the normal wooden door that matched the rest of the house, then a screen door. The big door was already open, the screen one filled with holes but still standing there defiantly. If Gregory left out the front, more people would see him, which would make it easier for his mother to find out where he went. The fence had a loose board that was able to be lifted just enough for Gregory and James to squeeze through the first time they had done this, and though he didn't know the exact directions to the Pizzaplex, he was sure that he would be able to find it if he retraced his steps. Gregory got a little impatient, a little clumsy. He was so eager to get the heck out of there, he didn't consider where his mother might be. He nudged the screen door open, catching it so it didn't slam shut behind him. Just as he pivoted to make a break for it, he made direct eye contact with his mother. Gregory halted mid-step, his throat snapping closed like someone was wringing his neck. He was completely paralyzed there on the porch, watching as his mother tried to catch up with what was going on. Even though the porch had prominent splinters, his mother somehow managed to pass out there, of all places, flat on her back with her knee leaning against the outside wall of the house, several more bottles surrounding her along with a pile of broken glass. From this position, his mother's head was upside down, staring at him with foggy, bloodshot eyes. For what felt like an eternity, Gregory just stood there, glued to the spot as she held him in her stare. His mother blinked a few times, her hand flopping over her face like she was trying to bat away flies. "Who the f*** are you?" she asked groggily. The slurring to her voice was immediately recognizable to him. She was still very, very drunk. Gregory opened and closed his mouth a few times, nothing but a pathetic squeak coming out. His mother was already rolling over, her head swaying back and forth as she straightened up. Now that she was right side up, she seemed to recognize him. "Oh, it's you. Get back in your room right now." The order didn't have its usual force, the tail end of each word melting into the next. "Okay," he whispered, slowly backing away from her step by step. "Yes, ma'am, I'm going back." Instead of heading inside, he touched down to the backyard, bundles of overgrown weeds brushing against his ankles. He felt like he was facing a bear, keeping each movement slow, not wanting to turn his back to her. Unfortunately, her haze of confusion didn't last long. "That's not your room," she protested, hissing in frustration as she tried to regain control of her limbs. "Where are you going? You're gonna get me in trouble." By now, Gregory's elbows brushed against rough wood. He took his eyes off of her, the bloody sunrise bathing the backyard in dark crimson as he patted his hands along the fence, trying to find the broken board. Hey! Footsteps staggered around behind him, but he just kept searching the pads of his fingers, harvesting a whole colony of splinters as he pushed on every crooked board. Where was it? He should have found it by now, right? A bottle shattered against the fence only a foot or two away from his head, making him recoil in alarm. She was throwing bottles at him! A second bottle cracked and fell with a dull thump to the tangled weeds, immediately followed by a sharp impact to his right shoulder. Gregory cried out, the edges of broken glass cutting into his arm as he scrambled to get out of her range. There it was! He could see the loose board, tilted to show a tiny triangle of the world outside, a view that expanded as he grabbed onto it and forced it wider. "Get over here!" The board was ripped out of his hands as he was dragged to the ground by his ankles, his chin chipping the edge of the cracked bottle hard enough to bleed. The alcohol was no longer working in his favor. The sluggish stupor she had been in before was replaced by a burning inferno, amplifying the worst parts of his mother all at once. "Where are you going? Are you trying to run away? Again? Are you serious?" His mother yanked him further from the fence, chunks of grass ripped up from the roots by his grabbing hands. He tried kicking her, but with her hold on his ankles, he couldn't deliver anything more than a flailing squirm. "Let me go, please, just let me go!" Gregory wailed, twisting around to face her. "Please, just let me go! I don't want to live with you anymore! Please, just let me out!" The claw clip had completely fallen out of her ponytail by now, knots of greasy brown hair flying all over the place, sticking in her mouth and obscuring her bloodshot eyes. "What?" He couldn't tell if she was offended or if she genuinely didn't understand what he just said. "I know you hate me," Gregory whimpered. "I know you don't want anything to do with me. So just let me out. Let me leave. You'll never have to see me again." She tried to haul him closer to the house, but her right leg gave out and she slopped over onto the browning grass too, her hands climbing up his legs to get a firmer hold on him. He could clearly smell the alcohol on her breath as she spat out a few strands of her hair, sputtering, No, you can't do that. I'll be in so much trouble. They're gonna think I killed you or something if they don't see you around. You're not gonna leave until you're 18. No! Gregory didn't even know why he was saying no. He knew it wouldn't change anything. No! Get inside! His mother managed to find her balance again, staggering back towards the stairs with him in tow. He was being dragged backwards by his ankles, making it impossible to get his feet under himself, and he ended up knocking his face harshly against all three of the porch steps on the way up. The last step hit the side of his head with the scars, making him go limp for a second. Next thing he knew, the screen door was swinging shut inches from his nose, followed by the final house door, the deadbolt clanking into place. The odor of lukewarm pizza flooded into his nostrils, disorienting him further, making him teeter right on the edge of throwing up for far too long. His mother was somewhere behind him in the living room, throwing around random curses, but she had let go of his ankles. He lunged up at the deadbolt, trying to undo it, but intense pain shot through his head as his mother grabbed him by the hair and yanked him back again. Her greasy hand clamped onto his face, her untrimmed fingernails cutting into the scars as she tried to cover his mouth. "Stop screaming!" Gregory's body acted on its own accord, his neck twisting as he bit down on her fingers with an awful crunch. She screeched a curse, slamming him against the floor with enough force that it almost knocked out a tooth. Seemingly propelled by a need for revenge, his mother got down, grabbed his arm, and bit him back, hard enough to draw blood. It was so ridiculous it was almost funny, but in the moment, Gregory screamed and wrenched his shoulders back, snapping his fingers close to his chest the moment that she released him. He kicked out towards her, but she was stumbling towards the back door, running into it and sliding down against the corner, putting great effort into standing upright this time. "Don't go!" His mother was firmly blocking the screen door despite the wobbling of her legs. "What the hell is wrong with you? You're trying to give me rabies?" Gregory was crying hysterically at this point, his gasps for air punctuated by uncontrollable sobs. His body had locked up, staying where he was on the floor, trying to protect his head in case if she went after him again. He needed to stop crying, he needed to stop looking like he was worth her attention. He had to lie still and hope that she would forget about him. "What? Am I not good enough for you?" She started hollering from where she was. "You trying to leave me too? Are you embarrassed of me or something? You want to throw me away and pretend I don't exist?" She tried to throw something else at him, but the thunk landed on the sofa's leg instead, making him only curl up tighter. "You know, you're just like your father," she kept ranting on and on. "Oh, I'm sorry I'm not perfect. I'm sorry you didn't pull out in time. I'm sorry you don't want to be a teen dad. Well, guess what, buddy? I didn't want to be a teen mom." Though Gregory was keeping his mouth tightly shut, he was a little surprised to hear her talking about him. In this house, even mentioning the fact that James and Gregory had a father was enough to get a mouthful of soap. So, because of that, Gregory had almost no information on him. The only thing that he remembered was that his name started with a J, because he had gotten in trouble after remarking that it was funny that the beginning of James's name matched his dad's. "You did this to me, Gregory. You know that, right? James was already too much for him, but when you came along a couple years later, forget it. Goodbye. All that mother is good for now is child support, and the same goes for you." A numbness began to crawl over Gregory's mind, like his brain was physically trying to shield him from her words. "This is all your fault, Gregory! You ruined me! You ruined everything! If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be stuck here changing diapers and staying up all night and rocking you and shoving baby food down your throat. I'm all on my own now! I'm alone! I'm all alone! I'm all alone! I never should have kept you, Gregory! I wish you came out fucking stillborn!" Gregory retreated further and further inside of himself, the crushing weight of her voice threatening to bury him alive. Scalding tears began to form a puddle where his cheek met the floorboards, his breath trapped by the hands that were protecting his head from further damage. Every part of his body quivered of stinging shock, pain blossoming across his shoulder, his spinal bones, his head, his bitten arm. But his mother seemed to finally run out of breath. She was panting hard, shaky and uneven, but didn't go after him. He heard a slide and then a thunk, as if she had slid down to the floor, too. He stayed exactly where he was, trying his best to choke back any cries of pain, hoping her motivation to keep going would dwindle now that he wasn't fighting back. He was bleeding. His arm was bleeding. He could feel the wetness of blood trickling down to his elbow, the semicircle of marks blazing clear across his skin. He wanted to survey the damage, but he was going to lie there on the floor for hours if it convinced his mother that he wasn't worth the energy of continuing to hound on him. Before anything else could happen, a noise from the outside world distracted them both. At first, it seemed like only a car was passing by. But instead of the rolling crunch continuing on past them, the pace of the wheels slowed down, turning, pulling up into the driveway. Gregory still wasn't quite sure if this was really happening. It felt like everything around him was drifting far away, like he was floating in a void of numbness. His mother was moving again, getting up, staggering and dragging a hand along a wall, passing him by. Her footsteps slid left, then right, unsteady and uncertain. And then there was a knock on the door. Everything paused for just a moment, like the house itself was in denial of what this disturbance meant. Then his mother's footsteps rounded back towards him, her iron fist grabbing his bitten arm and pulling him off of the floor with enough force that he thought she would dislocate his shoulder. He saw half of her face, the other half almost completely hidden by her mop of tangled hair. His whole body locked up, giving no protest and allowing her to drag him to the right and drop him back to the floor. "Down!" she snarled, her alcohol-tainted breath washing over his ear. "Stay down and keep your mouth shut. If you make noise, I will call the police and tell them to arrest you for trying to run away." Gregory only whimpered in response. His face was nearly wedged beneath the sofa, his hip poking against a leg of the coffee table. The sofa was between him and the door, hiding him from view. His mother's footsteps bustled towards the door, shuffles and swipes telling him that she was trying to flatten her matted hair. When the visitor knocked a second time, his mother gave a frustrated sigh, taking in a deep breath before finally cracking the door open. There was an intake of breath from his mother. "Crystal?" "Ruth!" the visitor chirped, seemingly relieved. "Oh, thank goodness. I was getting really worried about you. You weren't answering any of my calls." Gregory was completely motionless, still frozen in the same position he had been dropped in. But inside of his head, his mind was racing with faint, flickering memories. Crystal. He was aware of her. Some sort of distant relative? He wasn't sure if they had met. Maybe they did, just when he was too young to remember. Either way, she certainly hadn't been around recently. "Oh, yeah." His mother cleared her throat. I was sleeping in late." It was clear she was stressing herself to match the pace of a normal, coherent conversation, seemingly hyper-aware of her previous slurred speech. It was easy for him to assume that she was trying to keep the mess behind her away from Crystal's eyes. "Okay, well, are you feeling okay, Ruth?" Crystal asked, her relief bending into concern. "You don't look so good. Your eyes are all..." "I'm fine, it's nothing," his mother said in a rush. "It's just, I just woke up. What do you want?" Crystal hesitated, seeming like she wanted to say something more, but she eventually just continued. "Well, Dr. Morris called me and said that you two didn't show up." "Show up for what?" "The therapy appointment for Gregory," Crystal explained. "I paid for it since you said that you couldn't, remember? You two were supposed to go to Dr. Morris yesterday." All of this was completely new information to Gregory. He was slowly growing more alert the further the conversation went, though he made sure to stay in place. Therapy? His mother never said anything about therapy. Maybe she had talked to Crystal about this while she was out, and Gregory just never got the message. Oh, right, yesterday. There was a lot of things going on yesterday. I forgot," his mother said, tripping over her words. "Hey," Crystal's voice softened, making it a little difficult to hear her. "I completely understand if he's a little nervous. I was too, but Dr. Morris really helped me out after all that stuff happened, and I really feel like Gregory needs this after all that he went through." "Oh, yeah, of course," his mother said slowly, trying to hide her irritation. She didn't seem to be able to think of any good excuses, at least none that wouldn't make it sound like she wasn't invested in her son. "Okay, are we just supposed to go now, then?" "She agreed that you can come in later today," Crystal told her, her smile showing through her lifting tone. "She said that she has an opening at 6 in the evening. Here, I can send you the location." By now, Gregory's mind had returned to him, thoughts beginning to click on again and bump into each other. Careful not to make a sound, Gregory loosened up his rigid posture, pushing himself to sit up against the sofa, facing the black TV and the dead-bolted back door. He found himself staring down at the bite mark in his arm. A thin semicircle of indents had been made on his right forearm, only a few inches down from his wrist. The streaks of blood were beginning to harden, but the mark still stung with a deep soreness that seemed to embed itself along the bone. Therapy. He only vaguely knew of its definition, but he had never thought that it would be something brought into his life. A doctor for a person's feelings. A doctor who wanted to help. He lowered his arm and tucked it against his chest, his eyes magnetizing to the deadbolt, then the piles of empty bottles strewn across the floor. If he couldn't run away on his own... He remembered what Freddie had told him so long ago. Tell an adult. He jumped quite a lot when the front door finally snapped shut. Shit. His mother hissed, her footsteps trailing around the kitchen a few times before she finally blundered back into his view. He kept his eyes on the floor, not giving any resistance as she grabbed his wrist and pulled his right arm up to take a closer look at the bite. Damn it, how am I gonna... She muttered to herself. He just kept staring at the floor, his shoulders so tense it felt like steel cables were strung between them. She kicked one of the bottles and it spun and hit the leg of the coffee table. He tensed, but did not make a sound. Clean yourself up, she ordered, tapping him on the side of the head. You've got until 6 to bathe and fix your attitude. Don't worry, guys, there's still hope for Gregory. So, I got this chapter out earlier on this week, so that's nice, yay! Stuff like this is probably gonna hopefully be happening more often. I'm gonna be editing some more chapters right after I'm done with this, because, you know, now that I'm monetized, it's more worth it, and you know how to get the episodes out even sooner? Like and comment on the video, because then it's able to reach more people, and therefore it's more worth it because I'm getting more money, because monetized and stuff. So far, I have made about $4. So, eventually, I'll get up in numbers, as long as I have you guys' help and I'm able to contribute more and stuff. So, you know, if you liked the video and you want the next one to come out sooner, remember to like it and to comment about your favorite part. It doesn't have to take super long. It can just be, wow, I like the video, woo, or whatever. Just, you know, anything really helps. So thank you so much for all of your support. Next episode, at the very least, should come out 2 weeks from now, but it's probably going to come out sooner. So anyway, bye. Thank you. I love you all. Bye.